let's talk about what has happened in the last 40 years when it comes to LLCs in this country. The thing is that LLCs have actually changed a lot in the last 4 decades, not just at the federal level, but also at the state level, okay? But the one of the things is that the real foundation, the real definition of LLC hasn't really changed. So if you think about LLC, I want you to think about limited liability company, right? So you have limited liability. In other words, you do not really put your own assets, your own personal assets, actually at risk. Okay. So the thing is that an LLC has really gained in popularity in the last 20 to 25 years. Back in the days, it was more C corporation. So if you are an entrepreneur and you were to really structure your business, structure your activity as a business, you would go for a C corporation. The S corporation wasn't really popular at all. I mean, it was really for more sophisticated, quote unquote, sophisticated entrepreneurs to really convert their C corporation into an S corporation. Okay, so back then it was more the C corporation, but nowadays the cool thing is that nowadays you see a lot of entrepreneurs really embracing the simplicity, the flexibility, and the adaptability of the LLC. Okay, so that's pretty good because the benefits of forming an LLC have remained the same for the last 20 to 25 years. So when you think about LLC, you think about limited liability. You think about clarity with business partners. In other words, everything is clear. Everything is put in paper. Is put on paper in terms of equity, in terms of benefit splitting, in terms of loss splitting, all that kind of stuff. You also have the ability to claim your business name. So you are able to claim business name a lot easier now because you have the technology to really do so. Back then, you had to go through a lawyer to kind of help you out. Now, with an online tool, you can see if the name is available and then claim it real fast. You also have the ability to raise funds faster through an LLC, even though a C corporation remains the preferred conduit for investors. Okay, but the cool thing is you can still attract some kind of equity funding through an LLC. So in the last 40 years, just to give you an overview, what has changed here is the fact that you have seen a lot of entrepreneurs embracing the LLC type of structure, but also the fact that you are able to raise funds faster. In the last 40 years, what I've seen here is that basically forming an LLC has become a lot easier. I mean, back in the days, like 20 years ago, or 25, or even 30 years ago, it was more complex. In other words, if you were to really form an LLC, you had to go to a lawyer, to a specialized lawyer, or you had to go to a CPA, or you had to go to a company that specialized in that kind of formation. Nowadays, because of a lot of legal tech companies on the market, including Zen Business, you are or even Busy, formerly known as well, I'm just blanking on their name before. But what I'm trying to say is you have a lot of a lot of new companies that have made the whole process of forming an LLC a lot easier for entrepreneurs. So that's really fantastic. That's really fantastic. So basically, if you were to form an LLC today, the first thing you would do here is to actually conduct an LLC name search, and you have the technology to kind of help you out. You don't have to do it manually. You don't have to go on the internet. You can actually you have two types of technology. You can use the technology that a third party company gives to you, so you can search for names on their platform, or you can go to your state department's website and go to their search function, and every one of the 50 states has that functionality. So you have a tool that allows you to see if the name that you want to choose for your LLC is available. So this is a major development because everything starts when it comes to forming an LLC. Everything starts with having the right name. Okay, the right name in terms of not really infringing on somebody's IP rights. Okay, and that's really important. So today, as opposed to 4 decades ago, as opposed to 3 decades ago, you don't need a lawyer to actually form an LLC. You don't need an expert, quote unquote expert, to form an LLC. You can form an LLC yourself. Okay. You can also form an LLC through a third party company, such as, like I said, Zen Business or Busy or LegalZoom or a Rocket Lawyer or whatever. Okay. So you would just need to pay attention to restricted words, trademarks, and also the name availability in your state. You also today, if you want to really form an LLC, you have to register the DBA name in some cases, which was not something that you had to do back in the days. So something to think about. Another development that I have seen in the last 40 years is the fact that you have to register a domain name. I mean, 40 years ago, we had nothing. We had nothing about the internet. We had nothing about the website, so there was no reference to a domain name. Nowadays, you have websites, you have the internet, you have the World Wide Web, and you got to have a domain name. If you're an LLC, you want to really have a domain name, or at least register the domain name. Why? Because maybe one day you want to really be on the internet. You want to have a website for your LLC. So it's just better for you to quote unquote block right now. Block right now. You want to block or lock. You want to lock it in, lock the domain name in. Okay. So that's kind of cool. And you also have to. But by the way, in terms of having the domain name locked in, you can do this online. You don't have to do this over the phone or manually. You can do it online, and you don't have to go to a lawyer. But once again, and it doesn't matter what state you're in, you can do this remotely. Just go to those are third party formation platforms. And another thing that hasn't changed, and this is something that hasn't changed the last 40 years, is the articles of organization. So basically, you still had to, like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, today, if you are filing an LLC, you still have to file articles of organization. The only thing that has changed is that now you have templates available. So if you are filing for articles of organization today for your LLC, you have ready-made templates to actually choose. Back then, again, you had to go to a specialist. You had to go to a lawyer. You have to go to a CPA. You had to go to someone who really understands how to draft that paperwork. These days, you just have templates on the internet. That, by the way, those templates are coming from third-party websites, but also from the state department, your own state department of states. Okay, so just at the very basic level, on a let's say on a document that really refers to articles of organization, you have to put your business name, the address where your business will be registered, which may or may not be where your physical business is located, and your name as well as the names of any other officers. So that's really important. And one thing I want to say here is that after you file the form, you have to really make sure that you have the required fees. Otherwise, they're not going to really they're not going to process anything. Okay, and you can do so right now online, actually. In the last 40 years, when it comes to LLC, there was a major development when it comes to registered agent. Registered agents used to be lawyers, used to be CPAs, used to be third party companies. And they actually started being prominent 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when states across the country started paying attention to the legal correspondence that they were having with LLC owners. Because back then, a lot of LLC owners didn't have a registered agent; they were choosing themselves as registered agents. So what happened was that the state will send a legal correspondence, let's say a lawsuit or let's say anything regulatory related to the LLC owner, and they won't get any response at all. I mean, nobody was responding to the state, and officials were really pissed. Okay, they were really pissed that there was no sort of control on that front. So basically, they imposed. That's the proper word. They imposed now a registered agent, and a registered agent you can still be your own registered agent, but it's just a lot better to assign the task to a third party. Nowadays, you have a let's say a diversity of registered agent companies, and they can also be individuals. Okay, but the cool thing is that those professionals are able to receive things like service of process notices, compliance related documents, and communications from any government agencies. Okay, so the registered agent has become very prominent in the equation that the LLC has to play or has to navigate with the state. So basically, if something is happening, you are able to rely on your registered agent. As a matter of fact, nowadays, as compared to 30 years ago or 40 years ago. You didn't have to even put your LLC's members in the articles of incorporation. You can just put the registered agent. Okay, so another thing you have to do, and that you had to do anyway, 4 decades ago, 3 decades ago, was the operating agreement. Nowadays, authorities are more, let's say, they are really they're more emphatic. They're focusing on the fact that an LLC must have an operating agreement, simply because sorry about that. Putting things on paper can really help big time. For example, let me drink some water here. Thank you. So what I was trying to say here is that when you think about an operating agreement, you are speaking directly or indirectly about the percentage ownership among members, powers, and responsibilities. Here, I'm speaking about an extra layer of accountability. See, the whole thing is, imagine if you had an LLC, right, that operates in New York, and that LLC also operates in Chicago, in Illinois, and the same LLC also operating in Florida, for instance. If you don't have an operating agreement and you have tens of LLC members, things can be complicated. Things can be very, very fuzzy, right? So having things in an operating agreement in terms of the percentage ownership among members, powers and responsibilities, voting rights, rules about transfer of members' ownership, those things are really cool because they add an extra layer of clarity. In the last 40 years, the publication requirements for LLCs have changed big time. They have become more mandatory. Back then, it was optional. So if you had like 20 years ago or 40 years ago, if you had an LLC, if you had formed an LLC, it was optional, depending on the states where you were at, to actually publish the notices in a newspaper. Okay, so states were pretty comfortable that just, hey, listen, as long as you are in good standing, as long as your LLC is in good standing, you are good to go. Nowadays, things are becoming more mandatory. State officials are moving towards let's say what I call a world of transparency. So they want things to be transparent. So some states, not all 50 states though, some states will require you as an LLC to publish a notice, a public notice that announces the formation of a new LLC, usually in a local newspaper, and your state's filing office can give you details on how to fulfill these requirements, including where and when publication must occur, and whether you will need to publish more than once. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool from a flexibility point of view. You also need to obtain a business license and permits, or a series of permits. This hasn't changed. This hasn't changed a lot. It has remained similar to what I've seen in the last 40 years. So you still have to go through the process and get business licenses and permits. Okay. So this depends also on the niche the niche you're in. It's really depend on that. And another important element was the EIN. The EIN is a relatively recent sort of development. Back then, an EIN was not required. They had a different types of identification. It wasn't an EIN, and the IRS didn't streamline the EIN process back then. Okay, but nowadays the process is streamlined big time. So if you have an LLC, it's automatic. You have to automatically ask for an EIN. Okay, that's one of those things I want you to think about. And so just remember that an EIN is actually your company's social security number. It's an equivalent of your company's social security number. So that's what it is. In the last 40 years, one thing I've seen also is that the state departments of labors in all 50 states have become more involved in LLCs more than they were 40 years ago. Okay, 40 years ago it was more lax. The whole environment, the whole regulatory environment was more lax. Nowadays, states are really paying attention, especially when it comes to tracking tax revenue. Okay, so basically, if you have an LLC nowadays, you have to automatically register with the state, unless you only have one employee. If you have more than one employee, you have to register with your state's Department of Labor. So a lot of companies, if not all of them, automatically will do that registration without even counting the number of employees because you're thinking, hey, listen, if I don't have employees now, I'll probably have employees anyway at some point. So maybe it's just better that I register with the state right now, okay? And also, what was really what was what has changed a little bit in the last 40 years when it comes to LLC is actually the fact that you can have you can open a business bank account now a lot more easily than it was back then. Back then, you had to really show a huge amount of paperwork, just just to justify just to validate, if you will, just to validate your corporate structure, your business structure. Nowadays, everything is streamlined because maybe you have the fact that you have companies, third party companies that are taking care of the LLC formation aspect of things. So they have all the paperwork that you can actually present to the bank and open your business bank account. Okay. As a matter of fact, there are banks throughout the country that have something called LLC bank account. So bank account that are specifically for LLCs. I can remember, for instance, Chase, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo. That's for the national banks. For the regional banks, you have PNC, you have U.S. Bank, you have Key Bank, you have Truist, you have BMO Harris. You also have other players. You have Fifth Third, you have Huntington Bank. You have a lot of players. Okay, so that's really good in terms of stability, if you will. So what's really good to know when it comes to a LLCs in the last 40 years is that what something that has something has changed a lot also when it comes to compliance and record keeping, and that's because nowadays you have technology, you have a lot of software tools on the market that can help you big time. Okay, before it wasn't really easy to comply with LLC regulations across all states, especially if you are an LLC that's domiciled or that's operating in multiple states. Okay, and also the same thing for record keeping. So let's first talk about compliance. Basically, you have to comply nowadays for you have to comply with LLCs at the federal level. Okay, because there was a recent law about LLC owners. Okay, the disclosure, the person of interest. That's an important element. But you also have the compliance at the state level. I mean, an LLC has to comply at the state level primarily. So that's an important element to think about. What I want to say also is that if you think about an LLC in the last 40 years, what I've seen is that the compliance and record keeping actually can happen automatically, and you can really do things remotely if you have the right software or you have the right company, the right let's say if you outsource to the right company. Okay, so this can be an LLC formation service, or it can be a third party that actually does it for you. Okay, so bottom line here is what in the last 40 years, an LLC has gone through changes, but it has always remained the fact that with an LLC, you are able to get things done a lot more easily nowadays. You have a business structure that's easier to start up and maintain than C corporations or even S corporations for that matter. And but the major type of let's say the major type of protection here is the fact that you have let's say liability protection. So something were to happen, the owner's personal wealth is preserved. Okay, and that has not changed in the last 40 years. But that's really good to really think about. So in conclusion to this conversation, I just went through the last 40 years of LLCs in this country. So I spoke about what an LLC was and what it is today, how to form it, okay, and what's really good to know in terms of regulatory compliance and record keeping. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.